Hi darlings, how are we on this fine day? Where I am, it's beautifully sunny and beautifully windy, and it's just my two favourite things. I'm so happy. Today, we are finally getting to the poly video, the why choose video. So let's get the definitions out of the way. Why choose is basically where you have the main heroine or protagonist, and then you have three or more heroes or heroines around them who they're building relationships or connections with, but that those people are not in relationships with each other. So you've got your main heroine who's in relationships with up to probably about 5 other people, but those 5 other people aren't in relationships with each other, they're only in relationships with the heroine. And then you have polyamorous relationships where the main heroine or hero has relationships with more than one person, but those other people also might have relationships and different dynamics between themselves. So there are little definitions. There are also little subgenres, like a lot of why choose is mafia. There's also the Omega-verse, which is where humans have animalistic traits and hierarchies and biological compatibilities. And then there's obviously your alien varieties, and then you have your horror ones, which might be that every other character is a specific monster or a specific creature. So there's lots of subcategories within the genre. It's kind of exciting. There's lots of variety, which we love. And often a big draw of why choose or polyamory books is that you get multiple tropes in one book. So instead of just having one, maybe let's go with captive, not something I read, but go for it. You might have like a hero who is a cinnamon roll. You might have a hero who is stoic. You might have a hero who is troubled and mute, or you might have a hero that's really egotistic and charismatic and a fuckboy kind of vibe. So in why choose or poly books, you have lots of different characters, lots of different varieties, so you'll have lots of different tropes, and that also means you can explore lots of different relationship tropes as well. So you can explore like second chance, you can explore love at first sight, you can explore soulmates, you can explore unexpected pregnancy, but like all in one book or one series, which is quite exciting and again keeps that variety. So you get quite a lot. Often why choose or poly romances are serieses, just because you have so many relationships. Obviously it takes time to explore all of that, and then there's often a sense of suspending your disbelief because often there are quite dramatic or convenient plot points that mean that all of these characters are in one space working towards the same goal at one time, so the relationships can blossom, right? So that's why a really popular poly or why choose romance genre is the rock star, which is one of my personal favorites, and you'll see this on this list, which we're gonna get into. So let's refer to the notes. 1 second while we load. Okay, so speaking of my favorite, the first why choose we're gonna get into is the rock hard beautiful series by C.M. Stunich. We've got Groupie, Roadie and Moxie. It's a 3-book series, and this book follows Lilith, Paxton, Ransom, Michael, Muse and Copeland. The latter are in a band, and this starts out as a why choose, and then by the end of the series becomes poly because 2 of the guys develop a relationship. And this is a rockstar romance. So we have Lilith, who has kind of been cast out into the world with no family ties because her dad has died recently and has lost her apartment, has lost all of her connections and jobs, and she's in like a dire straits kind of situation. And then out of the blue almost, she gets tickets to this concert, tries to sell them, instead gets a backstage pass and gets free entry to this concert where she meets the band who learn about her plight and kind of take her on just to try and help her get to the next city so that she can get home for her dad's funeral. So that's kind of the convenient kind of plot point that draws them all together. But then through this you learn that the band is falling to pieces and they have their own overarching plots in the background. So you have Paxton being like a rich bad boy who has serious parent issues, and then you have Paxton and Ransom who have a dead girl between them in their past, and so there's a lot of like tension and like fight between those 2 because they dislike each other completely for what went down between, you know, that relationship with the girl who died. And then we have Michael, Muse and Copeland, who all have their various kind of traumas they have to work to. I believe Michael doesn't want to get close to anybody. Muse had a really traumatic past but nobody knows about it, and then Copeland is someone who has attachment issues, so he like cannot go to sleep by himself. So he kind of gives everybody the perfect boyfriend experience, but only for one night because, again, issues. So you have all of these different dynamics. And this becomes like a beautiful, beautiful story of these guys, all of them, including Lilith, kind of working through their grief, working through their issues, whilst just trying to get through each show and write music again and be inspired and kind of revive their music career, because they're a hugely successful band, but obviously the media has clocked that they're not in as much harmony as they used to be. And I believe there's a background plot about somebody in the media wanting to like take them down, and especially to destroy Lilith, because obviously that's the point of contention for fans, that now their favourite band are like off the market, as it were. Hate that phrase, but we're going to go with it this once. And so there's kind of lots of angst in this. There's lots of past rivalries to get over. There's the process of grief for like every member of the band that they're working through. And so it's a really, really beautiful story. For me, this is quite a fluffy read of people kind of coming together, found family vibes, and figuring out how to live again and choose to live again and kind of create their happiness in the context of this gorgeous musical career. So that is Rock Hard Beautiful. Next, we have the Blackwood Institute, which is a dark romance. Do check your trigger warnings. And I'm going to consider this a poly romance because, again, we do have a relationship between two of the guys already in existence, and then we have relationships happening between our main heroine Brooklyn and all of the guys eventually. So we've got Brooklyn, Eli, Phoenix, Hudson, and Cade. This follows all of these people are in a mental health institution. This mental health institution also does experiments on their patients, and so like the overarching theme is that they're trying to take down this institution that is committing like atrocities across the country vibe. But what this is at the heart as well is each of them coming to terms with their different issues, and again kind of working through them to create a life for themselves. This does not sugarcoat anything. This is a brutal depiction of mental health, and really everybody in this book is traumatized, so just be aware. So we've got Brooklyn, who is a person with schizophrenia, and she's also let's not reveal that. Okay, so yeah, she has schizophrenia and she's committed crimes that get revealed, and she really, really, really has to work through this idea that she's not worthy of being saved, of being loved, of receiving anything pleasant, and that's kind of her biggest thing she has to work through, as well as this then programming that she gets forced upon her that she then has to undo post escape from the institute. And then we have Eli, who, again, hugely traumatic past, which you'll learn about, and he struggles with self-harm, and he is also mute for most of the books. So you kind of work through his inner monologue, but also see the depths to which all of the group listen to him and value him and develop their own ways of communicating. It's really, really beautiful. And then we have Phoenix, who is an addict of both drugs and sex, and he also deals with mania. And so you kind of see him use these coping strategies to kind of keep himself afloat, but you also see that puts him in detriment and like damages his relationships with everybody in the group. So wicked interesting. And then we have Hudson, which is a second chance romance between Hudson and Brooklyn. Hudson is your classic bad boy, damaged background, but he also did something horrendous to Brooklyn. And so that second chance romance has really dark undertones, but for your possessive trope, he is there for you. And then Cade is kind of sweet but highly organized, and also struggles with OCD. So he has major control issues, and a savior complex. And so you kind of see how that interacts with everybody, and he's kind of he thinks he's the glue of the group for a good portion of these books. But you see how each of them interact to again overcome their traumas, but this doesn't sugarcoat anything. You have on page mental health struggles, you have on page abuse later in the books, you have on page death and decapitation. Like, please read your trigger warnings with this one, but it's a riveting story, page turner, because you've got really high stakes of literally saving thousands of people's lives, never mind this main group that you're rooting for, and then you've got the very intricate, detailed, complex characters interacting with each other and developing their own relationships to again kind of build up authenticity and strength within the group and just create a safe space for them. It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous story. So if you can get through the hardships, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Definitely one I want to reread when I have the mental bandwidth to do so, because so much happened. And you also get like breadcrumbs of there's there's another series by this author. I can't remember what it's called, I'll link it. But you kind of get breadcrumbs of another poly group that you might want to read as well. So that's really exciting. Then we have the classic by now probably, Loser's Duet by Harley LaRue, which again, I'm going to classify as a poly romance because we're seeing a theme here. It's a poly where choose romance because again, you've got your main female character and then you've got four other characters. 2 of the males in that have a relationship, possibly all of the males actually, have a relationship with each other. And again, it's that beautiful, like really with this duet, you've got a found family vibes completely, and you've got them working through, Jess particularly working through her shame around her kinks and coming to a place of acceptance and choosing to put herself first in her life is really, really important. So, but the guys themselves are kind of the outcasts, the strays of their town. And they kind of create a little home for themselves, which again is gorgeous, gorgeous to follow. So let me take it back to the beginning. We've got Jess, Manson, Lucas, Vincent, and Jason. Jess, it was the mean girl to all of these guys when they were in high school. Like he bullied them like heck and caused a bunch of crap for them. But then once they leave high school, they're at a party and Jess and Manson have like a kink experience together, and it unlocks something in Jess, but she is avidly against it because she's stuck in this like perfect girl persona that she wants to break free from but doesn't know how. And so she kind of becomes indebted to the guys because her car breaks down, and then she breaks into with the group of naysayers in the town. She breaks into their garage and does a lot of harm to their property, and so then she's conveniently indebted to them for sexual favors, and that becomes like a story of unlocking kinks and self-acceptance and different forms of relationships and creating a fulfilling life for yourself. And so you kind of follow them, explore their relationships, explore their careers, decide on whether or not they want a future for themselves, and see them kind of create their own safe space amidst a town that really doesn't want them. And then there's also an overarching, can't remember, plot of Manson's dad who's harassing the group and creating a really unsafe environment, and so there's like some criminal activity there that comes to a head in Loser's Book 2. But this duet like pulls at your heartstrings because you care so deeply for every single character. Every single character deserves happiness, and like they pull out really the best parts of each other, and it's gorgeous. So I can't recommend Harley LaRue high enough for this genre. Then we have another rock style romance. This one is a classic why choose. It's The Boys of Bellerose, where we follow Billy, Jace, Angelo, Grayson, and Rhett. This is one where we clearly get different tropes. So we've got Billy, who again has a bit of a tragic past and has to kind of undo some trauma wounds. We've got Angelo, who that's a second chance romance between Billy and Angelo because they were childhood sweethearts, I believe. And then we've got Jace, who is a rich guy and kind of the bad boy of the group. And then we've got Grayson, who wants to get involved in the romance but is really slow to it because he's just damaged and he doesn't trust that he can kind of commit to anything. And then we have Rhett, who is the softest soul. Again, he's been through some trauma in his childhood, but nobody really knows the extent of it. And so Billy kind of helps him work through and create like a soft space in his life, which is gorgeous. But all of these characters, again, really support each other to be the best versions of themselves. This one, though, is quite high stakes because it's also, they're a band, so it's a rock star romance, but then it's also a gangster romance as well, a mafia, that's the word, mafia romance. So there's kind of ends up being quite high stakes with like kidnapping and conflict and gang wars and all of this kind of stuff. And I believe Billy is running away from someone and again seeks refuge with the band. And so it's that little bit of convenience, but this one is more like Rockstar meets mafia vibes, which is really fun, really playful. And somehow, even though it's really like a serious premise, like I find this one's quite soft and lighthearted compared to the dark stuff I usually read anyway, especially compared to the Blackwood Institute. Holy hell. So anyway, again, speaking on the fluffy side of things, the more fluffy side of things, we have Pax St. Clair, which is a little similar in that you've got a group of guys. This one is in the Omegaverse though, so these are guys and girls who have biological animalistic traits. So you have things like people who they need an Omega for their group, and Omega is someone who's like sexually viable, able to have children, and satisfy everybody in the group in the way that alphas need. And then there's kind of, I want to say it's like primal play adjacent in the kink world, because there's more kind of animalistic growls and stuff in the spicy scenes. But again, you get like lots of different tropes in this. So you're following Lydia, Rhett, Lucas, Alexandra, and Matteo. So Lydia, trigger warning for domestic violence. So Lydia has been in a abusive relationship for ages and is trying to ditch that guy, and he becomes a stalker. And so she kind of seeks refuge with this pack as a last ditch attempt to free herself from her past, essentially. Then we've got Rhett, who is very, very kink forward and wants a dynamic with Lydia, and that's kind of how their relationship kicks off, really. So that's about kind of creating safety, but also being okay with being sexual again. And then you've got Lucas, who is a soft boy who just wants to keep everybody safe, but you have tension between Lucas and Rhett because they struggle with sharing. And then Alexandra is a female alpha who, the relationship between Lydia and Alexandra is initially like platonic and then kind of develops through the series. So that's a really, really beautiful way of exploring how A, relationships develop, but B, how gender doesn't define what is on access to you in relationships, especially in poly relationships, I think. And then we have Matteo, who is a rich guy who owns a business guy. He owns a bunch of hotels, and he just wants like a family and something soft and to keep everybody safe. And this one is a bit of mafia-esque. No, that's incorrect. What am I saying? This is not mafia-esque. This is crime adjacent, because you have the pack trying to keep Lydia safe from her ex, who's become a stalker, and also from an ex Omega who like wanted to get into the pack, but they rejected because he's a little psycho. And so his mission in life is to try and take down this pack who are just trying to do business and keep things afloat, etc., etc. And then he ends up like working with the stalker guy to try and take the pack down. So I believe some of the pack members end up going to jail because they're falsely accused, and like it really messes with the structure and the safety of the pack. And so you kind of got that almost thriller-esque theme throughout, again, while everybody's just trying to heal and connect and figure out what they want from their relationships and what they want for themselves in the future. I haven't finished this series yet. It's one I want to get back to. It's just that I put it down and then I forgot about it, and now I'm going to have to start again, and that puts me off a little bit. But I know it's a fluffy read for me, so it's something to get back to, maybe in between the Legacy of God series, which I'm working through at the moment, which is kind of darker. So yeah, then we have the Madison Kate series. This one, again, formative for the why choose like genre, because it blew up like a house on fire when it was released, and a lot of people recommend it. You've probably already heard of it. But in Madison Kate, we have Kate, Archer, Cody, and Steele. Archer, Cody, and Steele are all friends who live together, and Madison Kate kind of returns to her hometown after being falsely accused for crime, and believing that those three guys set her up, to find that those three guys are now living in her home. And so the first book is definitely enemies to lovers, and again you get different tropes, different like character types with each of the guys. So like Steele, I would say, is like your softest guy, who again is just really, really wholesome and supportive and emotionally there. Archer is very aloof and businesslike and holds back from the interactions quite a lot, just because he's so freaking busy and like it puts himself responsible for the safety of the group. And so again, he holds them back from getting connected because he doesn't want to lose sight of that. And then we have Cody, who is really in between the both of them. He's kind of there to have a good time and push boundaries and see what he can get away with kind of vibe. And I believe this is my choose, because they all have a relationship with Kate, but they don't have a relationship with each other. The guys don't. There is some like sword crossing, some like parallel play, but again, there's nothing more than that between the guys. And again, this is gangster, fully gangster. So, but I would say quite soft gangster genre. So because there are fights and there is like criminal activity, but it's very like minimal and in the background. The main thing is the relationships between the characters and everybody like pushing boundaries and seeing what they can get away with. And then again in the background we have a stalker who's trying to take Madison Kate down, because she's very famous in her town, because she, according to the town, did this terrible crime that damaged the whole town. So like there's a stalker who may or may not be trying to kill her, you don't know, but that's kind of like the thriller element that runs throughout the whole book. And then you also have like gang rivalries in the town, because you later learn that these guys, a lot of their money comes from gang territory, and so you kind of see that in the background as well to kind of keep things going, which is really cool. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is one I actually have in physical form. The others are all on Kindle. Is Dowry of Blood. This is a polyamorous romance between, it details Dracula and his brides, but how to explain, this book has themes of, let's read the trigger list. It has themes of domestic violence, it has emotional, verbal and physical, intimate parts of abuse, gaslighting, war, famine, blood and gore, sadomasochism, self-harm, body horror, alcohol use, depression and mania, drug use. So it's quite a heavy book, but it's beautiful in that it's set up as letters from Constanta to Dracula, detailing how she took him down and how they escaped from this really abusive relationship with Dracula. So we have Constanta, Dracula, Alexei and Magdalena. Dracula is really somewhat of a background character in this. You see the harm he does, and you see like the manipulations he puts forward, and you see the impact of him on them very, very clearly. But the onus, the attention is definitely on the relationships between Constanta, Alexei and Magdalena, and how they work and fight and like scheme for their freedom. And it's a beautiful chronicle of how these characters really complete each other and complement each other and learn to live apart from each other and then come together again, and how their connection changes over hundreds of years. It's absolutely gorgeous. Cannot recommend it enough. And again, although it's very complicated in that sense, it's very easy to follow because it's written in the form of these letters that can be anything from like 3 sentences to 5-10 pages long. So it's very easy to follow in that sense. It's extremely gorgeous, but do again check your trigger warnings because I only read out about half of them. So we can see how kind of why Choose and poly romances range from like rockstar fluffiness to Dracula trauma, all the way to kind of gang violence, and then Omega Verse is mentioned as well. But the onus, I think, the thing that keeps people coming back to poly and why Choose romances is the fact that you have multiple tropes in one book. You're exploring polyamory, which I love is becoming more and more accepted in the world, and you're exploring like different ways that people create fulfillment in their lives, which is gorgeous. Never mind like the found family aspects and seeing people work and grow and work through trauma side by side in these really thrilling contexts of like avoiding death and avoiding institutes and avoiding stalkers. You know, like there's these things that like set the pace and keep it interesting, even though on the whole I would say poly romances are very, very character driven. Like there are definitely poly romances that are like spicy time driven and like good for you, but the ones I read are more plot driven, more character driven, more mental health awareness driven. As I've mentioned, we love a good mental health representation, we really do. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite genres, especially because for me I'm polyamorous, and so it's beautiful to see this represented accurately in terms of like communication and people saying what they want and being really, really clear, and people saying what they don't want and being really, really clear, and like seeing how these relationships change and develop over time as people get to know themselves better and as they get to know each other better. And like seeing all these many different ways of fulfillment. Like I really love that at the end of poly books you rarely get just one ending, because each of the relationships will have a different tie up, and then like also the families by the end are obviously non-traditional because it's poly, right? So although you might have a couple with a baby in the polycule, right, you might also have a couple who are together but one of them's in France all the time, or are together but like they're one of them's an Olympian, and like, do you know what I mean? Like there's all walks of life represented, and it's really, really gorgeous. And I especially love when folks from different cultural backgrounds get together in specifically polybooks, because there's a lot of space to explore those kind of different backgrounds and how you incorporate them into each and everybody's lives. Beautiful way of growing. So that's all I'm going to do for today. I could keep going, but then this video would be like 2 hours long. So one topic at a time. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you're a little curious to try all of these different genres. I've just done the tip of the iceberg here with kind of the most popular tropes and genres of poly and white choose, and I hope you found a good mix of poly and white choose romances. If you have any questions, pop them below. If you have any recommendations, pop below, and all the details for all the books will be in the description. I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.